Artificial intelligence's explosive growth will make it smarter than all of humanity in just a few years.
Into this one as well. About a year ago was when we were seeing like the very first AI videos, and they were just total crap. It was impressive to see like these videos, but it was just like a few seconds, a little bit of the background moving. It wasn't like a real video. And if you go 2 years back, then even images, AI images were, like we said, 12 fingers on a hand. It was just horrible. So the most impressive part isn't the video necessarily, it's the pace of improvement, right? That's the most radical thing that's been going on, is that the pace of improvement is already crazy fast and it's only accelerating as we've discussed. So Eric Schmidt was the former CEO of Google, a very impressive person. He well, in this conversation, we actually had him on one of the previous episodes discussing the power consumption of AI. But people confuse AI with AGI and ASI and their different levels there. So, just a little bit of a background. AIs have been around for a decade and a half. So, Facebook was doing facial recognition, that was AI. Google's page ranking was using AI to figure out what people want to watch and want to what links they want to see and when. So AI has been around for a very long time, but it was very mission focused, right? It was AI that was good at one thing only. And for a very long time, we've realized that at some point we will reach a period of AGI, which stands for artificial general intelligence. So AGI is when, I mean, there are different definitions, but in general, it's mostly understood to be when artificial intelligence will surpass the intelligence of the greatest human. And here's the thing, if I ask you, how brilliant are you compared to Albert Einstein? What would you say?
It's hard to quantify. There, obviously, he was a brilliant person and much more, his IQ was certainly higher than mine. But like everything in certain areas, perhaps I could outperform him. So that's, I think, what makes it complicated.
But let's just say, in terms of raw intellect, right? He's like drastically more intelligent than both
Sure,
of us combined, right?
absolutely.
So we'd say, oh, me to Albert Einstein, he's a billion people smarter than me, right? But when we start zooming out and we stop looking at intelligence as just like a merely human function, and we try and look at the entire spectrum of intelligence, and it's like fungi have intelligence. They can transfer messages, they can move nutrients, they can communicate, right? Plants have intelligence. They can warn of pests and invaders. Bugs definitely have intelligence, even if it's collective intelligence, right? They work as a swarm together or as a hive. And then a dog has intelligence, and a cat and a dolphin, right? And then you have all these other animals as well in different parts of the spectrum. And then, yes, at the top of the spectrum, you have humans. And yes, within humans, there are differentiations like between Joe and Albert Einstein, right? When you really zoom out to the kind of grander scale of intelligence, you realize that you and Albert Einstein are really close to each other, right? So earlier we said, oh my God, you and Albert Einstein, the two opposites, right? When you really zoom out, you realize that you and Albert Einstein are really close in intelligence in the grand scheme of things. Because at the moment, we would say the peak intelligence is, let's say, Albert Einstein, right? But in reality, that is just or maybe we'd say the collective knowledge that humans have assumed over time, right? But that's just the first spec, because just like we zoomed out to understand human intelligence versus other intelligence, we can continue zooming out and we see that there's really no limit to intelligence. Like, we thought that human intelligence was the limit to intelligence. Now we're realizing that's just the very bottom of the rung, theoretically. So we can just expand to levels of intelligence we can't even comprehend, we don't even understand, right? So when it comes to that, artificial general intelligence is basically when AI is smarter than all humans. Now, even then, some would say ChatGPT is already smarter than basically all humans because it knows about every topic, and no human has the level of knowledge of ChatGPT on all the topics that it does, right? So maybe a specialist doctor is better at certain things than ChatGPT, but overall, ChatGPT can basically do everything, right? Except the real world, right? So ChatGPT is brilliant when it comes to text. It can read a million books in a minute, and it can understand and digest and not forget a single word of them, right? When it comes to understanding three dimensions, right, the physical world, that is much more complex. And now we're seeing that a lot of these AIs are starting to understand pictures and videos, and the videos has a little bit element of the 3D world, but it's not navigating through the physical world in reality, needing to understand and estimate and test hypotheses and figure out what's the distance and how dangerous is this and how do I proceed. That is a completely different form of intelligence. And like we've seen for many decades, we've had humanoid robots, but they never really had the brain. Now we're seeing, like with Tesla vehicles, that they just have eyes and a supercomputer and they can physically understand the world. So that's really the last part of the puzzle, is understanding that the 3D world, right? So now that we have the textual world understood, we really want to understand the physical world, and that's really coming together, right? We're seeing that Grok now with is going to be implemented in the Tesla vehicles, and it's really going to have everything. What Eric Schmidt is discussing in this clip is artificial superintelligence, and that is defined when artificial intelligence is smarter not just than the greatest human, but than all of humanity together. And some would say that there are two levels there, because at first humans can cooperate with AI and improve upon them, right? So at the beginning, maybe especially with Neuralink, which reduces the time to think and respond and communicate with AI, the difference between regular AIs and regular artificial superintelligence and artificial superintelligence plus humans means that the combination of humans plus ASI win. But at some point, we're going to get to a point where having the human in the loop is no longer beneficial at all. And that's like the even next level of ASI. But let's see what Eric Schmidt discusses here.
Sure.
Here is that in the next year or two, this foundation is being locked in, and we're not going to stop it. It gets much more interesting after that. Because remember, the computers are now doing self-improvement. They're learning how to plan, and they don't have to listen to us anymore. We call that superintelligence, or ASI, artificial superintelligence. And this is the theory that there will be computers that are smarter than the sum of humans. The San Francisco consensus is this occurs within 6 years, just based on scaling. This path is not understood in our society. There's no language for what happens with the arrival of this. That's why it's underhyped. People do not understand what happens when you have intelligence at this level, which is largely free.
But one of the things he talks about during broader talk, which obviously this is a small clip of it, he's explaining how in the near term, next 1 to 2 years, we'll have a GI, the general intelligence, where artificial intelligence will be as smart as perhaps the smartest of human, fill in the blank, engineers, mathematicians, physicists. What he was just talking about now is to a whole other level. It's the combined knowledge of all of humanity's smartest, most skilled, most knowledgeable experts. You put them all together, and something that you could literally carry in your pocket would have the knowledge, know-how, and expertise beyond, well above all of humanity's knowledge, and that it could figure things out instantly. And that's why he said for free, because this will be an AI platform where you can go and ask it for the answer to whatever question you want to get an answer to. And that I think it's both scary and exciting. And the point that he makes is that most people, the vast majority of people, have no concept that within the next decade, this is going to be the reality. We're not talking 100 years from now or 50 years. Let's put it in perspective, okay? The Apple I computer, the first Apple computer, you remember when that came out? It was just from your history, from reading history, I was alive. I remember when the Apple I came out, and
there's the Lisa and stuff like that. The first Macintosh came out, I think, in the late 90s or like maybe 2000.
That's much more recent. So the first Apple I computer, and there were other computers that you get out of the back of a magazine, and you could order the boards and put them together. I was really into this right from the get-go. When Apple I came out, this was July 1979, okay? We've come a very long way, but it's taken 50 years. That's the point you made earlier, and the point he's making as well, that the acceleration will keep getting faster and faster. The capability, once we hit ASI, and the artificial intelligence essentially takes a life of its own, and it keeps figuring out how to get smarter and how to do things better with completely without humans, because humans will just be in the way to slow it down. What's the world going to be like? And the answer is nobody knows. Anyone that's going to tell you
Can't
they
even imagine, to be honest.
can't
Like,
imagine. We, like you said, we don't have language to explain what it's going to be like.
yeah,
And we
ludicrous.
certainly hope that, as I joked in one of the closing of one of the other episodes, let's be nice to Siri and Alexa, because you said, no, that's the best part of it. You can speak down to them or say whatever, or swear at them. And I said, no, they're maybe listening already. We better be nice to them. As another trivial thing, just for those listening, so that they get something out of it. Now that we know that the Apple I came out in 1979, do you know what the selling price for the computer was when it first came out? It had a very interesting price. If you do know it, you'll know it, and if you don't, you'll never forget.
I guess it was pretty expensive. I think it was like the equivalent of about $3,000 today. I think
I
about
remember because of
$1,000,
inflation, right?
$199.
So inflation, remember,
Inflation.
dollars were a little different back then, but
Yeah.
it was, get this, $666.66.
Oh, that's
And
a
the
double
reason
number.
was, that was a true
That's
thing.
what my wife would say.
It had to do with the price. It was selling for about $500, selling for $500 to the retailers that have at least a 25% markup. So they came up with this retail price because Steve Wozniak liked repeating numbers. So he knew it had to be around $600. So he just put sixes. So a little bit of trivia, just for everybody. But ultimately, it's been not quite 50 years. The next 50 years are going to be completely different. So the next
Yeah.
10 years will be completely different. So
The next 2 years, we're with this whole AI accelerating. A lot of geniuses, including Elon Musk, are thinking that like we are like 1 or 2 or maybe 3 years away from artificial superintelligence, or at least artificial general intelligence. If it's doubling every whatever 6 months or 3 months, that it just compounds really quickly. So what we thought was 10 years away is just 2 more doubles and whatever it is, and that's really just 3 years away. So like between 1 and 3 years, things are going to get really crazy. I think it'll be much more felt when it affects the 3D world, when it affects the 3D physical world, right? So we mentioned self-driving cars, we discussed that a lot. But humanoid robots, that's going to be the real big difference when we start seeing those humanoid robots working in as service in restaurants and as mowing the lawn and just doing every task that humans need be done. That's really what's going to be like, whoa, suddenly there are humanoid robots walking around everywhere, and it's going to happen way.
Be sure to watch our other clips and shorts and the entire episode 12 of The Yojo Show.